Welcome to another episode of Antimatter Garage. If you read the title, you know I'm working on my wife's Solara. Here were the symptoms. Basically, I couldn't get it into gear, any gear. If I was in neutral, I couldn't get it in any gear. And once I got it home and I was in reverse, I couldn't get it out of reverse. So basically, it wouldn't shift. The longer version of that is, I was driving down the interstate, everything was going normally. I exited and I was waiting at the light to turn left, and I couldn't get it in any gear from neutral. And I'm not sure how at that point I got it into a gear. I kind of want to say I just sort of forced it, but I was able to sort of turn right to get out of the way of other people, come back around to that same light where it was less busy, and once it came to a stop, I couldn't get into gear again. And I think what I did, I shut off the car, and then I was able to get into first gear, turn the car back on. When the light changed, I was able to get to a gas station. Later that night, I came to pick up the car and was hoping I could somehow limp it home, and it shifted completely normally the whole way. I backed in the driveway, parked it, and I worked on my Spider. If you've been watching this channel, you'll know that I did an engine swap in the Spider, and that left me with no cars because I was doing the engine swap in the Spider. The Solara wasn't working, so I actually wound up buying another car, which I hope to get rid of soon. So now I'm done-ish with the Spider, and I've decided to start working on the Solara. And what I found was that to get it out of reverse, I thought on the internet, this problem of not being able to shift had many solutions, basically anything from transmission, clutch, master-slave cylinder, you name it, right? So I thought there was a chance it could be the cables. If they were locked up, then I wouldn't be able to move it, right? I didn't think it was a master and slave cylinder because I had done those freshly about 4 months ago. It could be cheap parts. It could be the fact that I had worked on it. Usually when you work on it, it doesn't work well. Usually it starts right away, right? So I kind of thought that wasn't the case. I had somebody step on the clutch and it moved. So I kind of think that when the fork in the transmission moves, that the master and slave are doing their job. So my suspicion was the clutch. And just now, trying to get out of reverse, and I couldn't, what I did was I stepped on the clutch a whole bunch of times, hoping I could sort of free up the actual clutch, and that worked. And I was able to get it into neutral. So now I'm hoping I can get it to take one more trip into the garage where I can replace the clutch. And I eliminated the cables as a source by removing them on the transmission, which was pretty easy. A little clip, washer comes off on both of them, and I was able to move those. So I knew that they moved fairly smoothly, and it probably wasn't them. And I wasn't able to move the transmission out of gear with my hands because of the clutch, right? So now I'm pretty sure it's the clutch. That doesn't mean that if you have this problem, it's the clutch. Unfortunately, just like everybody else online, I guess it could be any of these problems. But for me, it was the actual clutch. And I did the clutch, I think, like 8 years ago, so it could be time. So you want to see me remove the clutch in a 1999 V6 Toyota Solara? Want to see it again? Let's put on some music. As always, if I take off any vacuum hoses, like this little one that goes to the airbox, I label them. And I label both sides. That's important. The last time I did this, I realized that I only labeled one side, and I said in there, oh, it went to airbox, and then there were like 3 connections in the airbox, and I didn't know which one was which. I mean, generally it's okay, but there's always 1 or 2 that are the same and you don't know. And there are 2 air hoses, the little one that goes here, and another one that goes underneath on the back side there. If you are going to label the baggies that you put your bolts into, make sure they're Star Wars baggies. Okay, I just pulled this off, and when I rolled it around, look what I discovered. Nice cracks all the way through there. And this is after the MAF sensor, so that air is not being measured. I'm surprised the car ran so well. Gonna have to replace that. Okay, to get this out of the way, after you remove the throttle cables, you have to remove the entire bracket. If you take this off, the bracket will still be there and still be in the way of trying to get to those bolts in the transmission. So it looks like it comes off here with 3 10mm bolts. In this case, I think it may be a little bit easier to get to that plastic clip with the electronics on it, the wiring on it, if you get it. If you want, go ahead and remove that after all. Okay, here's another little thing to note. One of the bolts that holds the starter on also has this little clip that holds holds the clutch line on. So I may have found a larger problem here. This car has kind of a lot of oil leaks on it, and I haven't really been fixing them because they're very hard to get to, and I'm even thinking that at some point maybe the engine has to come out to do them, or of course if I go that far I'll probably just replace the engine. Well, I just pulled the starter out and you can maybe see here how oily that is, and it occurred to me after I did that there's really not supposed to be oil in there. That's where the clutch is in the flywheel. So I may have found a larger issue here, and I don't know where this is going to wind up, but that's not good. Look how thick it was. What the book says to do is remove that bolt down there at the end of my finger. I think you can see that. And unfortunately it's directly in line with the hard line, so I don't know how I'm going to get any tool on there, but that's what it calls out to do. Okay, so I think when they were talking about the fuel rail or the fuel line cover thing, I think they were talking about this because it gets in the way. The bolt is right there, and you can't really get a socket wrench on it. Okay, this was really hard, so what I had to do was grab it like this and just twist and pull with all my might to get that out of there. I was praising these clips earlier because they're so much better than the other clips, but because they just got this curve, right, and you stick them in there, and it was really hard. So it seems weird that they have to put the shift cables in there so tight. Just wonder, when you shift, do they want to move around that much when they're already in a little, little channel? I don't know, but that's how I got it out. Good luck. Okay, I think this is a little bit funny. It says, remove the front wheels and then raise the vehicle. How exactly do you do that? To drain the oil, you remove the 24mm bolt that keeps the fluid in, and it comes out in a glug, 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 and it's really pretty slow. But if you take out the other 24mm up here at the filler, it just starts flowing like crazy, and in fact, you'll need to make sure you shift your pan so it doesn't go all over the place. So it may seem like, I can wait, but really it makes a huge difference. So I need to remove the ball joint, and in the past I've had 3 methods for doing this. One was to put the nut on the end there and pound it out with a hammer on the bottom, but that typically destroyed the nut and a lot of times the ball joint. 2 is to use a pickling fork. Pickling fork, if you don't know what that is basically a fork-shaped thing. You stick it in here and it's got a wedge shape to it. When you pound it in, it forces them apart, and that always destroys the rubber boot. 3 was something I saw on TV where they took 2 hammers. One guy, so it was a guy on it was Ed, China, on Wheeler Dealers. You put a hammer on one side and you hit it with a hammer on the other, I think. Or you hit them at the exact same time with two different hammers and it shocked it open. I've never been able to get that to work. And so I'm trying this fourth method with a puller. This is the smallest puller I have. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm afraid it maybe, if it pinches that rubber there, then it's going to destroy the ball joint. So let's see if this works. Ha-ha! It worked. And the boot's intact. Woohoo! Finally a win on these things. The next step is to remove the lower ball joint, which is down here. But I just wanted to mention that if you own one of these cars, you may notice that this rotor, you may not notice, so I'm going to point out that this rotor is much, much larger than what normally comes on a Solara. And that's because it's actually off of a Toyota Highlander. And as it turns out, the brakes, they're dual piston calipers in the front and much, much larger discs. And they bolt directly onto the car and nothing else needed. So it's maybe not super cheap to buy the parts at the dealership, but it's way better than trying to buy like some kind of an aftermarket brake kit or something. And I noticed a huge improvement in the braking when I changed these brakes over. You could consider changing the master cylinder as well. I did not, and that causes the pedal to sink to the floor a little bit further before the brakes engaged. It's not a desirable feeling, but you get used to it pretty quickly and it starts to feel normal. But you can always change that out as well. So anyway, definitely a huge benefit here with these brakes. Okay, I used a crowbar to pry the lower control arm off of the bottom of the ball joint, and it says now to push this through to use a plastic hammer. I decided to use this plastic hammer made of metal. It also said try not to damage anything. Man, people should give me that advice more often. This is the kit that they loaned me, or what you do is it's basically just a liberal return policy. You buy it, then you can bring it back pretty much at any time. I've had it for a couple of weeks now because I knew I was going to do 2 cars. And I looked through this kit for something that would get on both sides of the axle so that I wasn't always angling it when I was trying to get it out, and none of them worked. This could go on here, but they weren't long enough and the rubber boot was in the way. So I grabbed this thing. It looks just a single hook. It's right here on the end, and I knew that was only going to apply pressure on one side, but that's kind of what's called out for if you do it with a hammer like they call it out in the procedure. So I figured maybe this will give me an advantage. And you know, I only had to hit it 2 times and it popped right out. I'm putting this thing on my Christmas list. So see, this wouldn't fit in. It was in the transmission all the way up to the shiny stuff, right? So it doesn't go around anywhere. It's just too small a diameter. So the hook just hooked on right there. Okay, under the car here, and the next shaft comes out by first loosening this bolt. It locks the shaft in, although honestly there's a little rubber thing on the end and it wears it down, and honestly I don't think it does anything. Then you have to take out the snap ring, and the snap ring is right. Let me see if I can position the camera. I'm sorry for all of the motion. And the camera's in my way. There's one end, and then up there is another end, and I guess you can squeeze them together and pull the snap ring out. So I don't know what people call this. I call it a broken shaft because it's got a break here in the middle that allows it to turn. To angle. In any case, on the Spider, this was an easy one to take out. There were 2 bolts that held it in, and I took those bolts out, and the thing basically just fell out. In this case, fortunately, that is small enough to use this on, and I had to pound and pound and pound to get it out. And in fact, it wouldn't really, the slide hammer really wouldn't slide because there was too much stuff in the way here, the brake and everything. I had to disconnect, at the top anyway, the anti-sway bar. I had to bring it down because this was right in the way of sliding the hammer any more than like an inch, which just wasn't getting it there. The next step is to remove the exhaust system. It says the front exhaust, but it's quite a bit actually. 17mm bolts here and here, best access from underneath. I think I should have probably shot a little bit more video of this. I forgot to grab the camera, but there are 2 bolts back there that you can see on the holes for on the exhaust. There are 2 bolts up here that hold the rubber gasket in. See the rubber gasket down there? And then of course 2 up here on the exhaust and 2 on the other exhaust. So the next step is to remove the power steering gear assembly. I think they're basically talking about the rack and pinion. And the reason for that is this subframe, you can see it here in this drawing, this big square ring, it's a major structural component to the front of the car, has to come out because it blocks the transmission from coming out, and it's attached to that. And so is the, I guess so is the anti-sway bar connector. So I've already done one on that because I showed you earlier. Anyway, so all that stuff has to happen. But what I think is really funny is right here it says tie the power steering gear assembly to the proper position with a code or an equivalent to suspend the assembly securely. So I'm going to have to go find myself a code. And FYI, in the past I was able to get the transmission out without removing the subframe, but getting it back in was impossible, and I wound up removing the subframe anyway. And when I did, I had all kinds of supports under here, and the frame came down, but I couldn't take it off because the supports were in the way, and I had to leave it on the floor, and I was laying all on top of it and everything. Don't do that. Just take the subframe out to remove the transmission, just like the procedure says, and then put it back in when you're done. I was about to hurt myself, so these days I got smart. Instead of pushing through and just doing it, I went and got my leather armor. And I loosened that already, but here's what happens if you've never done this before, is the ball inside this ball and socket will move. So when you turn this nut, you're not really loosening it because the ball is just turning in the socket. So they put a little Allen wrench on the end there. You got to put that on first, so that you can keep it. Actually, probably better to go that way, huh? So that you can keep it from turning when you turn this nut. So that's how you do that. So the book calls out for removing the stabilizer bar by removing these 2 bolts here, and then there's 2 on the other side. But because it's attached to the subframe, and I've already detached it from the car, I don't see any reason to do that. I think I'm going to try and just leave it attached. We'll see if I'm wrong later. The next step is to remove the rack after supporting it somehow, but I'm not going to worry about supporting it yet because it'll just sit on the subframe. I'll have to figure that out. I'm not sure what to put it on up here. All these things are kind of fragile, so I'm not sure how really to support it. But right now I'll figure that out later. First, I got to get out the 2 bolts. There's one down there, they're 19mm. There's one down there, it's easy to access. And the other one's on the other side and is accessed with tools only available to the people on the show Star Trek. It's right there, see? Okay, I now know why they asked me to take out the anti-sway bar, and that's because the power steering rack bolt on this side is right there. I hope that's picked up on the camera. This line is in the way, but you can see that this motor mount, I'll move it, see if that helps, is blocking that bolt. Well, on the other side, forgive me, I know the camera's moving all over the place, I'm sorry. Here's the other side, and it's blocked by, if you guessed anti-sway bar, you get the prize. So out it comes. Today's lunch consists of a barbecue chicken cutlet on a gluten-free bagel with cheese. Yes, I am a gluten-free person, but not by choice. Those people are just annoying. And I do like a little bit of mustard. And does mayonnaise go with that? Why not? A little bit of mayonnaise. It's all about the condiments, huh? I only use a little bit. Mayonnaise isn't good for you. And regrettably, I forgot the lettuce. I forgot to buy some lettuce, so I'm going lettuce free. Next one's toward the back of the car, back of the transmission. You can see this is a differential. Right there, there's this connection to the transmission from the exhaust, helps support the exhaust. The bolt, give me a second. I can't see what I'm filming, so I hope this is coming out. It's in its little cup here, and then this distance is not enough to get, you know, stuff in there very easily. I was able to get a wrench. That socket just rolled under my neck. Alright, I was able to get a wrench sort of in there and turn it, and I was lucky it wasn't very tight. In fact, I kind of think I didn't tighten it last time at all. And there's the fixture I created to hold the engine up. Hopefully it's strong enough. It certainly feels strong enough. And it's adjustable. I can slide in and out so I can use it on different cars. Yeah, I'm happy. Well, here's a way to test it. Alright, so that's, you know, 174 pounds. Alright, so there's my little engine sling support thing. I just welded it up. I had this pipe laying around I was going to use for exhaust, and I had this. Basically, it all was scrapping. I just put this yellow paint on it because that's what I had, and I wanted to protect it from rust. Although you can see it tears it up pretty good, and the paint comes right off. But it's working well. The engine's supported on it right now with this come along on the top. I had to make this bracket too because I didn't have one. Fortunately, I had some scrap plate that was pretty thick and strong. And then the other connection point is back there. It actually comes with the engine, so when you lift the engine out, there's a hook right here that's on the back of the engine you use if you're supposed to buy this one. And like I said, I didn't have one, so I think it's gonna work fine. I didn't have to take the hood off either, which the procedure calls out for. So I took out this bolt here, and I went ahead and took this one out too, just because. But I think this is the one that really needs to come out, and it's actually some kind of plastic clip which holds it on. Because you need to pull this out of the way to get to those. I think that's why they say to remove them. Both sides. I'd like to say for the record that I hate plastic clips. They didn't survive. Only one out of the 4 survived. Also, this is retarded to have an area like that on any car. I can't believe this hasn't rusted yet. The other side was completely full up in here. Okay, the next instruction says to remove this cover, and as you can see, it's not there at all. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I was certain when I saw how big that hole was that it should be there. Who knows what kind of rocks and things get kicked up in there that may even be the reason why the clutch needs to be replaced. Also, of course, the oil, it's all over everything is getting in there too, so I need to figure out a plate for that when I put it back. After you remove those last 3 bolts, I suggest looking around, making sure anything is going to get caught on it. For instance, this wire was still in there. This was open, but I could see it getting caught when I'm trying to wrestle this thing out, you know. So make sure all your wires are out of the way, and then you're going to get a like a crowbar, stick it between the engine and the transmission. There's usually a little spot you can find where you can do that easily and start to separate. It's on the transmission jack down here. So it was hard to get it balanced because it is heavy toward the differential side, but you know, I did the best I could, and we'll see what happens. clutches are actually pretty amazing. The friction material looks really pretty good. It doesn't even really seem, you know, wet. And this wears nice and flat. It's a little bit blued and there's some marks on it. Sorry for the background noise. But as you can see, a piece broke off here. It's rattling around in there. The seal is actually in there. So it doesn't seem likely that that's where the oil is coming from. However, I do notice when I grab this and I turn it, it's really kind of tough. It's real tight. This is the back of the flywheel where it mates to the engine, and I finally found the telltale sign I was looking for. Here you can see how the oil's been flung out. It even has this sort of spiral pattern to it. So that's got to be rear main seal. There's a lot of oil behind the flywheel as well, and the only way I can see that getting there really is if this rear main seal is bad. Alright, so I'm going to end the video right there. I know it seems kind of like a weird place to stop, but I just wanted to show you how to remove the clutch in this video because it was getting kind of long. But that is every single step in the book and following the book on how to remove the clutch from a 1999 Toyota Solara V6 with a 5-speed transmission. So, if you hang around in a future episode, I will show you how to put it back in. There will be a lot of little hints and tips in there, so you might want to do that if you have to do this job. Until then, thank you for watching.